video, we are going to discuss Canadian inadmissibility for permanent residence application under the independent or economic class. If you invest your time and money and get selected and finally come to know that you are inadmissible in Canada, it could be devastating. Therefore, please review inadmissibility conditions even before embarking on your Canadian adventure. Understand admissibility and ensure you do not fall under any of the inadmissible conditions, and if you are, then please do not attempt Canadian permanent residence unless you remedy that situation. Let me try to explain some of the inadmissibility conditions for Canada. Number one, medical inadmissibility. Permanent residence is always for the full family. If any member of your family is having a medical condition which is medically inadmissible, then the whole family is medically inadmissible. Therefore, please do due diligence that you are not having any ailment which could classify you as inadmissible. Medical inadmissibility comes under three different classes. A. Danger to Canadian public health. A health condition that could endanger Canadian public health, example having infectious diseases like tuberculosis. In some cases, you may be allowed to treat, cure, and then do your medical examination, Canadian medical examination, before you are allowed in. B. Danger to Canadian public safety. A health condition that could endanger Canadian public safety, like sudden incapacity or unpredictable or violent behavior. Number C. Excessive demand on health and or social services. A health condition that could cause excessive demand on health or social conditions, social services. Example, health or social services needed to treat a health condition that would negatively affect wait times in Canada, or manage a health condition that could cost more than the excessive demand cost threshold. So Canada has a threshold which it maintains to calculate such costs. Okay. Now we are going to the second inadmissibility conditions. Just like medical inadmissibility, there is also criminal inadmissibility, which is again a family thing. If any member of your family is criminally inadmissible to Canada, the whole family is inadmissible for permanent residence, whether accompanied or not. Okay, you may become criminally inadmissible if you have participated in a past criminal activity. You may become inadmissible if you were A. committed of an offense in Canada, or B. committed an offense outside Canada which is considered a crime in the country of occurrence and would be punishable under Canadian law. C. Let us also briefly discuss if the charges were withdrawn or dismissed, or absolute or conditional discharge, or even pardoned. Okay, under those classes, if the charges were withdrawn or dismissed, then you become admissible. If it happened in Canada, but you may become inadmissible if it happened outside Canada. 2. If the charges were absolute or conditionally discharged, then when you are not, then you may not be deemed inadmissible if it happened in Canada. Okay, in Canada, if it happened, you may be admissible, but it may be inadmissible if it happened outside Canada. So that also has to be considered. If pardon was granted, then you may be deemed inadmissible if it happened in Canada. You may not be deemed inadmissible. That means you may be deemed admissible if it happened in Canada, and you may be inadmissible if it happened outside Canada. Okay, so these are the conditions for criminal inadmissibilities. Now let us move to the third inadmissibility. Permanent residence under the independent class is fundamentally for people with work experience. Okay, so keep that in mind. No work experience, you do not qualify. Therefore, please gain those work experience before applying for Canadian permanent residence. I'm talking only about the independent class, skilled worker, etc. Okay, number 4. Most Canadian permanent residence programs require an educational credential assessment, or we call ECA. Secondary school in Canada in most cases means 12 years of education. Most probably, you only need an assessment for your highest level of education. For example, if you have a master's degree, you only need an assessment for that degree. You don't need one for bachelor's degree. But if you have done masters and also some other diplomas in addition, then you may possibly need multiple assessments. Some multiple additional points you might get by doing those multiple assessments for your educational credential assessment. Okay, and I'll just give you some pointers for that. A, when you get an assessment for more than 2 or more credentials, to get points for having 2 or more credentials, you need an assessment for each one of them. So if there is additional points for additional education, you need to do those credential evaluations. To get full points for more than one credential, at least one of the credentials must be for 3 or more years of study. Okay, so that is something you may want to keep in mind. B, if your post-secondary, that means after school credential, is not equal to a Canadian credential, then you should get your secondary credential assessed. This would get you points for completing secondary school. You may encounter challenges with your ECA if you do not have at least 12 years of education. Okay, so that is about ECA. Okay, ECA is a requirement for Canadian permanent residents under the economic class or the independent class, whatever you call that. Okay, now we go to the 5th inadmissibility, and that is language. Okay, English language or knowledge of French. Communication is very important when moving to a new country permanently. Therefore, knowing English or French is very, very important. Some immigration programs require a high level or a higher score of knowledge, and there are some programs which require very little score levels of language requirements. Therefore, if you would attempt for Canadian permanent residence, and if English is your language of communication, then you should require at least in the range of 5 in IELTS. Canada evaluates its language requirements through a CLB benchmark, or a Canadian language benchmark. It's score for English and a NCLC score for French. Okay, so this is how language you have to do the test for you to demonstrate your skill level. Keep in mind, even if your mother tongue is English, you will have to demonstrate the language score. Okay, so the next admissibility or inadmissibility condition is family circumstance. It's not inadmissibility, I've just thrown it here just to make you aware. Okay, I have included this point just in case. If you are separated or if you are in the process of a divorce and you have kids whose custody situation has not yet been determined, please attempt to delay your application unless the custody of your children is determined. If you plan to take your children with you to Canada, okay, this applies only if you want your children to accompany you to Canada, children who are dependents. Okay, these are some of the inadmissibility conditions, and if you have any of these, please discuss your concern with a licensed immigration practitioner. Please do not deal with unlicensed professionals overseas just because you should not be misguided. Please check this link, it may help. paulinsis.co/c